Welcome to MyLife, Chassidus Applied, episode 64. Being that we're coming from Chof Ches Nissan, which was just Friday, 24 years from that impassioned and dramatic talk that the Rebbe gave from the Bima, where he declared that I did everything I can. What more can I do? I did everything that I can, and it hasn't brought the Geula. With the strong words that disturbed so many, that everything I did was lehevel larik, which means empty or worthless, because the Geula has not yet come. So all I can do is to throw it, to give it to you. Maybe there'll be 10 of you, and if you would yell Ad Mosai properly, Mashiach Yeshua would come. Then later in the Sikha, the Rebbe said, repeated again, that maybe there'll be 2 or 3 of you that will put your heads together and figure out vimazolton, vazmazolton, what to do. And this Sikha has continued to plague and haunt Chassidim till this day, especially since the Geula has not come. The Pale Mamish, as the Rebbe was Meiser Nefesh so much, was entire Nesius and all his work toward that end. So first of all, regarding the words Lehevel Arik, I just want to say, every word that the Rebbe says is Chareb. Every sikha, every word comes out from him is coming from Elokus. A word like that is not out of frustration, God forbid, or out of emotion, or out of a momentary, God forbid, resignation. Achmon al-Itzlan. The Medrash says in Kehelas Rabbah on the pasuk Hevel Havolim that Teirosha Shel Mashiach, Teirah b'zman hazeh, learning Teirah b'zman hazeh, Hevel hu legabe Teirosha Shel Mashiach. The word Hevel. You know what that means? That all the Torah taught and learned by the Tanoim and Amoraim and from Moshe Rabbeinu till Mashiach comes is Hevel Kabet Teirosha Shel Mashiach. So number one is Aloshem Chon Chazal. How could you say such a thing? Because when you understand what Mashiach is, and you understand that the Rebbe is the only Rebbe in all of history that put the stakes up the highest, that his goal was one thing and one thing only, Mashiach, then obviously anything compared to that is Hevel. Not Pshat, Chassidus explained, not Hevel means worthless. It means, compared to that, it's Hevel. So that's number one. Regarding the big question, of course, is what does the Rebbe mean that what should we be doing? And here there are arguments and discussions. Bottom line is the confusion has led to paralysis. I will suggest my understanding of it, and I believe other Chassidim feel the same way. And it comes down to, like anything the Rebbe says, getting beyond the moment and the drama. The Rebbe says something, it has teichen, it has meaning, it's part of Torah, and it's an approach. Now you go back, Purim Tavshim Mem Zayin, the Rebbe said similar idea, where he spoke there about why the Geula didn't come, and he said the only answer, you have to Ribu Yegiya, that he came to, after the Frierdiker Rebbe announced the Ketz HaGeula, the only answer that he came to is that it went over from Hanossi to Akel. Had there been the proper, the proper iskashrus, then the Nasi could have accomplished it with, obviously with the support or the help or the work that we do. But under the circumstances of deeper cheshech, so it went over from Nasi to Akel, very similar, and now it's up to you. God forbid in any way to say that the Rebbe is absolving himself of responsibility. It's ridiculous. Besides complete kfirah, to say that the Rebbe's whole Mesiras Nefesh, his whole life, the Siyas, and all the Rabbeim, to say, I'm throwing up my hands, I can't do it, you do it. Anyone that thinks like that is a fool. It means part of the Rebbe's Heirah, part of his Aveda is to get us to do the Aveda. And there's something advos that we have to do that the Rebbe Kav Yochel cannot do. Now, can move in the Eibishter is Kol Yochel, the Rebbe is Tzadikim Deim Lebeiram, but there's something that's necessary. And when you think about it and you learn a little Chassidus, you realize it's not that difficult to understand. Even though we would love it to have been done Mamayla Lamata by the Rebbe, the Seder Aveda has always been that way. You try out Mamayla Lamata, which means it should come from above, or at least from a Hamshacha, from strength. And if that doesn't work, you have to go more Mamata Lamayla. And if that doesn't work, you need even more Mamata Lamayla. That's the bottom line. The Alter Rebbe says in Teirah, what does he say in Teirah? He says that if Adam and Chava had not eaten from Chet Eitz Hadas, from the Eitz Hadas, So what would have happened? The Geula would have come. He doesn't say those words, but the Teichen there says it would have been like an avuka, like a great flame that would have drawn all the sparks. There's 288 sparks spread over the entire earth. Not just in Gan Eden, everywhere. In Eretz Yisrael, in America, in Europe, everywhere. What would have happened had they done their work and not been Eivra and the Eitz Hadas? So the Avuka Gedel of Adam and Chava, which was the collective human race. Remember, both of them together is the entire human race. So you could imagine, they represented like 7 billion people today. They would have such a powerful Iyar that would have drawn all the sparks Mamayl Lamata. Through their work, sometimes the Rebbe puts it, according to the opinion, that the Eitz Hadas was a vine, that they would have waited 3 hours, they would have made Kiddush on the Eitz Hadas. Those 3 hours. Shalz of the Kash, how is that possible? 3 hours? It's because they were also the 7 billion collective Yetzer Hadas. Imagine how strong one Yetzer Hara is. Here, all the Yetzer Hadas put it, the Nochash HaKadmeni coming together because they knew the stakes were so high. Mashiach could come. The Geula could come. Once Adam and Chava didn't do the job, now you have to spread, like simple. You have to give the job to more people and spread them out. So comes the children of Adam and Chava. Then comes the next generation. As long as they did not do the job, more and more people, and this explains population growth and population transmigration, because now you can't just have one place and you draw all the netzutzes to it. You have to now go get them. And this is the story, my friends, of history. We begin spreading out. Then Bovel, and that spreads out, Sham Nafutz, the Chol Haaretz. And first the spreading out was the Chatzik Kadra Elyon. And there was Matan Torah, which brought back to the Matzav Lefnei Chet Yetzadas, like we learned from Bas Legani, the Medrash, where Moshe brought down the Shechina as it was in the beginning, Shechina B'Tachtenim, but then was the Chet HaEgel, which Chazar Zu Mosan, the toxins returned. And so went on history. More Mamayla Lamata, but then you need a Mamata Lamayla. Come Bayis Rishon, Bayis Sheni, as the Rebbe explains, Bayis Sheni compared to Bayis Rishon is more of a Mamata Lamayla. And that also didn't accomplish the job. Had that happened then the Geula would have come, and you would have had the netzutzas drawn from the rest of the world that where Jews didn't exist or no one existed yet, would have been drawn then to Chatzik Kadra Elyon. And then finally starts the Golos, the difficult Golos. But the Golos, says Levi Yitzchak Baditcher is Moshel for Shabbos Chazain, now I won't give you the garment, now I'll show it to you from a distance. So you should earn it. Not give it to you to earn it. Like it speaks about the first 26 generations before Matan Torah, Nizunim b'chazeh shel Kodesh Baruch Hu. That's why they lived so long, till the Mabul. And then comes stage 2, which is when that doesn't work, you have to do it from Matal Lamaila, which has the Maila, as explains in Shari Eira, the Maila of Primis Dikaved, from within. Comes the long Golos until the Rebbe makes the big fuss about the Frierdiker Rebbe coming to Chatzik Kadra Tachten. Why is that such a big thing? Because that's the next Shlav. We'd rather do it from Chatzik Kadra Elyon, from the other hemisphere. The Matan Torah was given in a revealed way. As the Rebbe writes in his letter to the Frierdiker Rebbe writes in the letter to the Rebbe about the issue. But that didn't work, so now came Chatzik Kadra Tachten. So the Tachten. So it was a new Shlav, Tovshin. So it's not a Pella then, when you start thinking of the Rebbe's Nesias, Tovshin Yud, Tovshin Yud Aleph, Yud Beis, that hopefully at that point, Deir Shvi would finish the job, we would do the work, and the Rebbe would finish it, and the Nasi would lead us into the Geula. But since for whatever reason Meizer Sibir Shatia is required a deeper Mata Lamayla, jetzt tut was ihr kennt, something we have to do. What can we do? As the Rebbe said, Derech Yeshara, the Shabbos Parshat Tazria-Metzora after Chof Ches Nissan, Torah and mitzvahs, learn Chassidus, Teirasa Shal Mashiach. But in a way that is negei b'nefesh, adaita denafshi, something that touches you. Live geula personally, and that is the mamat l'mayla that prepares the world. If all of us did that, and we spread that everywhere possible, if not just 530 people, but 5 million people would have written essays about Chassidus Applied. That is a perfect example. I'm not saying it's the only way. But this is what we can do, because this is in our power. Today with technology, you can reach literally every corner of the earth. We have the knowledge we have, the information we have the mayonis, we have the chutzah, and we need to bring us the yafutzu. As the Rebbe once wrote, that it kimeduma, the Rebbe is writing half humorously, kimedumali the haloshen who lo yatfisu meinesecha chutzah ella Yafutza meinesecha chutza. Spreading, distributing. So our work is making Chassidus palatable, making Elikus palatable, realistic, relevant in our personal lives. I believe I shared in the past a letter from the Rebbe that just gives you an example. A letter to someone who ran a laundromat. A laundromat. It doesn't get more mundane than that. And yet in there you could see the B'chol Derechecha De'eu, Mola Ores Deis Hashem Kamayim Liyam Mechasim. The Rambam says, what's the real Inyan of Mashiach? In the first stages at least, is that Lo Yiyeh Esek Kol Ha'elam El L'Dasas Hashem B'lvad. That materialism will not be an end in itself, it will be a stepping stone toward knowing God. In the Lashon of Tanya Perek Lamed Vav Lamed Zayin, Gili Elikus Be'elam Hazeh Agashmi. By doing something that reveals Elikus in this world, and specifically in Deis Hashem, which is Chassidus, and you see the Eyu, you see Mebsari Erzal Akah, in our flesh, from our flesh I behold God. In existence, every time you look at it, and you don't just see the physical reality, but you see the Aleph that you put into Geula, you see that is the Geula dimension. That's how we do that part. And if we teach it to our children, to ourselves. So in the laundromat letter, Bekitzer at least, the Rebbe says that everything is a lesson in serving God. What's the lesson from a laundromat? So laundromat, you think that you buy a garment, you wear it once, twice, 3 times, it gets soiled, wrinkled, dirty. At some point, that's it, you can't wear it any longer. Comes the laundromat, no. You could take that garment, you put it into water, and warm water, you mix it with chemicals, and then you take it out and put it under a heavy press, and voila, that's not the Rebbe's lashon. You have a garment like new, and you can do this process a number of times. What's the lesson? The Neshama shenasata bi tahirihi. The neshama is pure, but then life begins to wear it down. The wear and tear of life. The neshama gets soiled, gets wrinkled, gets challenged, gets depressed, gets resigned, can get resigned. So you think, okay, life breaks the neshama. So comes you put it into mayim, you submerge it into water, ein mayim elatera. And not just mayim, but mayim chamim, warmth, chayis, lebedik, varmkeit. And then you mix it with chemicals. Every mitzvah is a different type of chemical. And then gets rid of this stain and that stain. Then you take it out and put it under kabolos oil, malchus shamayim, a heavy press, commitment. And there you have the neshama is refreshed and renewed. And this you can do throughout your life many times. Here is an example. Next time you go to a laundromat, share it with the laundry person. You megale a lakus in a mundane thing like that. If we did this in every area of our lives, wherever we go, whoever we meet, whatever we encounter, this is how we bring Mashiach into our lives. Is it the full picture? No, but it's me'ein zeh, it's the taste of it. And Chassidus is Terosa Shel Mashiach. And acting on it is living by it and teaching our children that wherever you look at something, don't just see the object. See it how the object serves the divine, reveals a higher wisdom of the divine, and you're getting yourself a taste, a tayameh of the Gula Mashiach. Is this the only thing we can do? Absolutely not. But if you want practical, this is a practical application. Connection, of course, to Iyar and Parshat Tazria-Metzora, Chassidus explains and the Rebbe explains that Chof Ches Nissan is Mamayla Lamata, Nisim, Nigla Leim Melech Malchei Amlochim HaKadosh Baruch Hu V'Go'olam B'Chveidei Ba'atzmei. God lifted them up. Nissan was Mamayla Lamata. Iyar is Mamata Lamayla, where there's no lifting up. We do the mitzvah of counting and Birur Hamidus, refining ourselves. Mamata Lamayla. So Chodesh Harishan is Chesed. That's Mamayla Hamshacha Mamayla Lamata like Mayim. Chodesh Hasheni, which is Iyar, is Gvura, which is Mamata Lamayla like Aveda and Tefillah. And then comes Chodesh Hashlishi, Matan Teira, Teferes, Zeh Matan Teira. And that is the joining of Mamayla Lamata, Mamayla Lamayla. As we learn in Chassidus, that Mamayla Lamata, when it comes from above, it could be a greater revelation, but it's not internalized, it's not integrated as much. When it's Mamat L'mayla, it's more integrated, even though it may not be as great. Like it says, Adam Reitzeh B'kav Shalei, a person desires one kav, one measure of his own, Yeser, more than 9 measures that is given to him as a gift. 9 is more in quantity, but quality, appreciation, internalization. You won't blow it as quickly as when you own it. And then comes number 3, where you join the two together, Bayis Rishon, Bayis Sheni, Bayis Shlishi, Migdash Adnei Keni Yodecha. And Tazria-Metzora as well is discussed, because Isha Tazria, Isha is the Makabel Malchus, that's Aveda Momatel Lamaila, and what does that bring? Yolda Zocher. A Zocher is a Kayoma, the strength and power of Zocher, as the Alter Rebbe explains in Tazria, the Maimed in Likutei Torah, and the Rebbe explains it in several places, including a very classic Sikhe, Chelik Yudbeis, Likutei Sikhe, Tazria, the power of Aveda B'Keich Atzmei, the Aveda that comes from below, from within, generated by us. And Metzora, of course, Metzora itself, what is a Metzora? It's hardly Kedusha. Metzora has to be sent out outside of the Sholosh Machnes, it's Sholosh Klippos Hatmeis, and yet Mashiach will be a Metzora. Why? Because a Metzora is elevating from the lowest of the low to the highest of the high. Like the Sefer Yetzirah says, Ein l'mayla ma'onig, ve'ein l'mata m'nega. Onig and nega are the same letters. Onig is keser, primis ha-keser, primis atik, the revelation of the divine, the transcendent of the transcendent, and nega is the lowest of the low. Metzora, it's leper. And yet the nega leads to onig. That's briefly summary of something that's timely both in the Parsha and connected to Chof Ches Nissan. Let us continue now the discussion. First of all, I want to begin with some davening feedback. I spoke about last week about a husband wrote a question about his wife doesn't daven. And I want to read some feedback. Both I received feedback in writing and also orally. Some people suggested I may have been a little too harsh on the fellow. I didn't know who it is, and I still don't know. And I was addressing it, like as adults address something. My goal was not to be personal in any way, God forbid, but to address a topic the way it seemed incommensurate to the way the individual was challenging his wife. So here's one of the feedbacks that I received in writing. I love listening to your weekly episodes and admire the fact that you find sources for everything you say. Don't worry, I'm a big fan. Hatzlach. I was a bit disappointed with your response to the younger man who wanted to know more how to get his wife to daven, even though perhaps he might not be davening properly as you suggested. I feel here was an opportunity for you to give a few pointers on the importance of davening, as well as which parts are a must or just some kind of inspiration, encouragement. The reason I am raising this point is because this guy could have very well been my son. I have no clue whether my daughter-in-law davens or not, and I really don't care to know. Who was Parshat raised in an environment where davening was a part of his day, was a part of life by males and females. If I sent him out with a frum Chassidus girl, he must have thought davening was a given and no need to verify. Also, turning to you about davening, I would say that he highly respects his wife and is too sensitive to be able to approach her contrary to what you suggested. It sounded like he would like to raise his family while having the same priorities, goals, being on the same page as a spouse. You once also responded too lightly for my seichel to a lady who was bothered that her husband doesn't daven. A mother is bothered because her whole life is all about that her children grow up giving her nachas and doing the right thing. And when a spouse fails to provide that role model, her dreams are shattered. You cannot expect one who's passionate of a certain mitzvah, not stama mitzvah, but a must, to be okay and accepting if spouse doesn't keep it. You did address in the past when spouses are not on the same page in frumkeit level, and I don't think you realize the heartache involved. There's a very, very big nisayon, very big struggle in raising the children in that kind of frame. Well, I appreciate the points are well taken, and absolutely I would say that the words, when you're addressing issues like this, there are many different scenarios. For some reason, I have a knee-jerk reaction. Maybe it's not for some reason, maybe because I've seen so much pain inflicted by people who are judgmental in religion. So when I hear a question, when someone begins to challenge someone else's frumkeit, I immediately react in that fashion, not emotionally. It's just, I think, for many people, that is the bigger problem. But I definitely agree with what this writer writes, that it's very possible that this writer and others have an issue simply in a very quiet level, and they're not criticizing their spouse, and they just have internal aggravation of the level of spirituality. So let me address that in that context, which obviously addresses in a far more sensitive way. And if that indeed is the case in the fellow who wrote last week, I correct myself only in regard to that, if that's indeed the case. I don't correct myself because regarding the issue itself of criticizing, so I'm not sure in that situation, and it doesn't really matter. So we'll cover it from all bases. If indeed it's a case where a person is not challenging the other and does look at himself or herself and they're not always looking to criticize, which I said is rarer than the other way around, to be very honest, then here too, one has to wonder whether every spouse has to be exactly on the same level and the same standard. If indeed your spouse doesn't daven and bothers you, maybe you should say an extra kapitel Tehillim. Maybe you should pray to the Eibishter that there should be a Sederus. Maybe you should increase, like I said last week, in your own work and by example. And if that doesn't work, maybe you have to let it go. Because to make it a battle and to make yourself aggravated over something that may not be necessary to be aggravated over is definitely not good for Shalom Bayis and for marital relationships and for the home and the environment of the children and so on. Now, obviously, it's case by case. If it's something you find to be a cardinal problem, really fundamental, then you have to ask an objective mashpia, is this something worth addressing? And then finding the right way to address it that's productive. And I bend over backwards to say again, everything must be done to be careful for gvuras, that maybe it's your own insecurities and your own stuff that you're projecting. But I'm assuming now that is not the fact, which can be established only by an objective party. Then there are ways to do things that don't necessarily mean confrontation, don't even have to be directly addressed, and it could very well be this is something you have to do. That's what spouses are for. When it says a woman is parted from mitzvah shazman grama, is because it says that Arizal says when a man makes kiddush or does other things shazman grama, he's yetzer his wife for that. Just like his wife is yetzer the husband with things that she does. That's the partnership. So maybe daven more, and that's also for your wife. Why does it have to become an individual, personal matter? I speak specifically about davening. Davening is a very arbitrary issue here regarding women because it is reshus, and there's no mitzvahs as to daven unless you have needs, etc., etc. Customs are customs, standards are standards. But many times you marry someone that's not like your mother. Many times that's not like your sisters, not like the environment. So I don't think davening is worth making a fight over. If it's bigger issues that affect the children, affect the family in a very serious way, that's where I would reserve the so-called, not confrontation, but addressing the issue. So this was not in any way to dismiss the standard of a person may have. The question is how to address it. And I say again, the way to address it is to strengthen yourself and to strengthen your environment and to strengthen your home. Learn more, teach more, be more of a living example. And that stands by what I said there. Even if it's a situation where the person is not criticizing, but just something internal. As far as, and this goes both ways, the husband to wife and wife to husband. Okay. Now you could say, well, what about someone who's very passionate about a certain spiritual standard and the other person, their partner simply is not on that level? Well, this is the person you've married. And this is the person that you have to build Shalom Bayis with. Shalom Bayis is the biggest mitzvah of all. So maybe you need a mashpia to sit down and recalibrate what is a priority. What decides what's a priority? Just like many people kochzach in certain things, and obviously Israel is not on the top of their list, maybe that should be the top of the list because it's the biggest mitzvah. So just because we're used to certain things that call us what we could define as being frum or ruchnisdik or chassidish, you have to review that. And God sent you a spouse, maybe to review that. Again, I'm not talking about things that you feel that are really damaging or destructive. Okay, enough said on this, and let's move on to the next. Character refinement continued. Midas in our schools. Thank you so much for your weekly webcasts that I so enjoy listening to. They keep me focused on the Rebbe's inyanim and how they apply to my life. Regarding the question presented last week about the lack of teaching Midas in our schools, Midas meaning character refinement, being a mensch, values, treating others with respect, gratitude, and so on. I agree with you wholeheartedly that good midas is a hard one to master yourself, let alone teach to others on an age-appropriate level. This connects with looking to other sources for practical guidance as well. There are so many midas programs out there that aren't Jewish that understandably our schools may not want to use. I just wanted to bring to your attention, and anyone out there listening that is involved in chinuch, there's a new midas program that has been implemented in my children's school and had a huge impact on my children both in school and at home. It is called Project Team, and is based on Torah and Chassidus. It has given me as a parent amazing practical tools, all while teaching my children how Hashem loves and cares for them. I highly recommend that all schools looking to implement midas into their curriculum look into this program. You could search it under TorahTeam.com. Sincerely, an avid weekly listener. Midas Tevis, feedback number 2. Dear Rabbi Jacobson, I'd like to utilize this opportunity to express my admiration and awe of your recent endeavor, the Chassidus Applied broadcasts. At a time that we were Rahman al-Islam surrounded by Chof Ches Nissan, you jumped in and personified the directives of Chazal, Hamaisu Iyar. While time constraints prevent me from actively learning along with each week's broadcast, the bits and pieces that I've managed to learn have without fail been inspirational, practical, and pertinent. Your most recent broadcast has been forwarded to me by quite a number of parents in our school. The good news is that there are many of Anash here in Toronto who are actively learning along with your program. As it has garnered so much attention on this end, I would like to humbly beg your indulgence as I share my thoughts and feedback. While your comments about schools focusing on or not Midas development are transparently well-intentioned and non-accusatory in their presentation and context, I feel, and this is magnified by the obvious parent reaction vis-a-vis numerous of them sending me the link to the clip, that it came across, albeit clearly unintentionally, as somewhat condescending and critical. When you make mention that your program is not a platform for criticism of the schools, it implicitly indicates that there does exist reason to criticize the schools. I believe that your intent would be better served by stating that the schools are certainly doing a great job focusing on the Midas development of their students, on both a curricular level and programming, with programming and lessons and a personal level by dedicating time and resources way beyond classroom instruction, time to deal with children as individuals, al pi darke. Having said that, there's always room to grow, and the best way to encourage the school, the chazik yodim, in what they are doing and to encourage their continued growth and development is through parental involvement, as you very rightfully went on to point out. If anything, I would venture to say in light of Pera Odom Yevolid, which means that a person is born wild and he's disciplined, that the fact that there exists a shred of decency and courtesy in today's children, notwithstanding the climate of the social norms of the Welt, is testament to the great investment that schools and parents are putting into the youth and the fruits that investment bears. A case in point, and one from which I hope you will derive much well-deserved nachas, is the attached file that was inspired by your booklet, which I've been amending, updating, and adapting pretty much each year of the past 20 plus years that I've been involved in chinuch. This is based on my book on Sfiras HaEmer, it's referring to. Its current adaptation is for the 7th grade girls class that I'm teaching this term. I found it ironic that you made such notable mention of your book on Sfiras HaEmer in particular, when for so many years it specifically has served as the cornerstone of my Sfira curriculum for whichever level of students I was striving to reach. Perhaps this was all to serve as a Chassidus to me that I have been remiss in not sharing this credit with you. Best wishes that your efforts in Hafotzas Hamayonos be crowned with the ultimate success of Bias Mashiach Tzidkenu now. With admiration, respect, and blessing, Mayor Wagner, Principal Beis Chaya Mushka, Toronto. I usually don't read names, but here I asked direct permission because I thought it would add credibility. Mechanech, a known and respected Mechanech, to read his note in its entirety. Let me read a few more comments and then I will respond. No, let me respond to this and then I'll read a few more comments. So I accept everything that was said here. The whole point of MyLife Chassidus Applied is not some type of monologue where I dictate the terms and monopolize. It's about feedback, it's about give and take, and getting everybody's opinion. There's nothing greater, and there's no greater compliment to me, and no greater satisfaction I have is not when someone just says it was nice, but adds dimensions, adds nuances, even adds points I may have missed, or points that may have reflected not in the way I meant, and call me on it. I find that to be very engaging and very stimulating and very important for this platform to have. That's part of Chassidus Applied. You sit down and learn a piece of Chassidus and you apply it. It's not just dictating the terms. The whole point of it is that we all apply it together. We talk, we share notes, we compare ideas, a meeting of the minds, disagree, whatever it may be. So I appreciate this and all the letters that come in this context. And I honestly, I've not been in the school system for a long time, so I'm not the one to really come and speak what is going on, what is not going on. I've heard good stories, I've heard nightmares, so let's be honest. And we have to be straightforward and transparent. if indeed schools are working hard at this curriculum, and I definitely believe Rabbi Wagner is focusing on that, as many others. By all means, you commend them of turning people. I do say, you mentioned Pera Odom Yivoled. Frankly, that's used on Yishmael, so I don't know if that's a good one. Maybe you meant Yetzer Leva Odom Ramenu Urav, which is in Parsha Neach, but it follows Parsha Bereshis that everyone's created with Tzelem Elokim. That's tam as an aside. But getting to the topic at hand, yes, we need to create a revolution in Midas Tevis. And a revolution like this can only happen by a joint effort between parents and schools. Because children, firstly in the early years, are completely at home, and later years, even when they're in school, they're still at home. We have to make it our mission that when we shape our children, it's not just to give them knowledge and facts and information and data. It's character refinement, to bring a mensch. I quoted a number of weeks ago, Purim Tovshin Hey, V'naflinu, the Frierdiker Rebbe's beautiful sikha there. Talks about Midas Tevis, that a Chassidic child should be shining, that wherever that child goes, people say, look at what a refined child. Besides the Kiddush Hashem and Kiddush Chabad, Kiddush Chassidus, is Pashat a Kiddush Hashem in the context of someone, V'haftas Hashem Elokecha, as the Sifri says, means that God should be beloved, that someone sees you, they should say, a person like that, that's a godly person, that's who I want to be like. This should be a revolution, especially in our times where there's so much novel b'reshus HaTeira, despicable actions in the name of Teira, people who masquerade as religious and actually create the greatest desecration. This is how and what better way for a parent to have nachas, to see children that are not just knowledgeable and not just bright, but are sensitive, are giving, are not jealous, are not self-contained, are compassionate, empathy, and so on. And this begins at home, continues at school, back to home. It's a joint effort that has to be done, does not happen lackadaisically. It has to happen with a very deliberate, proactive effort that begins from the earliest childhood, even from the birth, even from pregnancy. I was just reading the Sikha, Shvuas Tovshin Chof Ches, coming Shvuas, Banenu Arevim Ba'adenu. Unbelievable, beautiful Sikha. I just encourage everyone to read that Sikha. Especially the Lashen is there, especially the Sikha as it is in Yiddish in the original. The expression and the elaboration, how chinuch affects from the youngest of age. The Rebbe actually brings it that today medical experts finally acknowledge what Chazal always knew. From the youngest of age, the Rebbe talks there about the unconscious, he talks there about Chof Ches Nissan, that even though you could say the child doesn't yet understand, but he says the neshama is awake and the neshama does understand. And the Chof Ches Nissan, the hidden faculties of a person absorbs, and so on. So yes, this is something that needs to be done in a very aggressive way. This will do the best preemptive and proactive effort to preempt so many of the maladies that we have. Today the best defense is offense. The way is not to wait for darkness and then say, and what do we do now? The way is to educate our children, how they treat other children, and not to touch a child in any way, not to bully, not to be inappropriate. This is all part of a positive effort that needs a real revolution and a joint. That's the real kavanah of my speaking about it. It's not about, even if there is things to criticize, it's not about the critique, it's about positive forward action and something that we have to talk about, and I wish there was much more engagement and even more people talking about it. Yes. So a few more comments on this topic. All we need is for parents and teachers to model menschlich behavior for the kids. Not just to model it, but to refine themselves so that the kids see and feel it. It's all in the deepest part and then comes out from that deepest part. That was actually a comment on one of the websites, COL, on this episode. Another comment from there. I've been witness and received really nasty, cruel behavior of people in their awful ways. Most of them not observant people. However, maybe I can put this down to their animal souls. But I've also received harshness, and my kids have had bullying from people and kids that are from legit. They come from families that walk and talk it. Some of these people are real gossip mongers. Love to get into your home, to size the place, ask so many rude questions, and their kids do so much damage by their unethical behavior. What point is there teaching these people anything when they are born into this way? My daughter left her school because some frum girls threatened her. Why does the community go merrily down the path of craziness and hysteria, ignoring those that cause problems by their animal behavior? They need other help big time. I didn't need to become observant to have manners, feelings, and good midas. I was shocked when I entered this religious world 20 years ago. I met some really crazy children, shocked at their ways towards others. Maybe I was born differently, But my children are known for their kindness, their manners, and their clear minds. You all could learn, and I mean learn from them. Okay, I'm not sure of all the details, and that person clearly must have reason. Hopefully it's legitimate reason to be upset. Yes, I've heard this voice as well, and I didn't want to silence it, even though this does go back to the critique that Rabbi Wagner took issue with. But I will say this. Yes, unfortunately there are people, and I know people who the system has disappointed deeply. And the system has hurt. People have hurt. Midas Tevis is something that we need to work on. I mentioned before the Sikh of Tafshin Hey. Look in the Kutei Diburim, the Sikh of Shmini Atzeres Simchas Teira Tafresh Tzadik Daled. First volume, I believe, is Daf Nun Vav Amud Aleph. It's cited right at the beginning of a Kuntis Yon Shal Teres Chassidus, where he speaks that the Kol Inyan Chassidus. It was settled that the Tzemach Tzedek from the Alter Rebbe. They asked the Alter Rebbe, "What is Chassidus?" He says, "Kol Inyan Chassidus is L'shanis Teva Midesov." And he says that the whole learning and everything, Kol Inyan is that. It's not the learning of Chassidus, the Inyan of Chassidus, the purpose. So Midas Tevis is just to be on the forefront of everything we do. It's sad that there people have been hurt. If you have been hurt, it's like anything in life. You cannot allow yourself to become a victim and just be angry and bitter. The best solution is to take action and to be at the forefront of this movement, of this revolution, of Midas Tevis revolution. That's the way we learn. We all have disappointments. We've all had experiences that the things didn't work out exactly as we liked. That's the way we have to approach it. And that's what I say to this writer. Question 1. Last week's discussion about the lack of character refinement in our educational system got me and my friends talking, and we fully agree. As a parent, it is of the utmost importance that our children grow up to be mentioned, and we focus a tremendous amount of energy to this end. Recently, I listened to and agree with the sentiments of Jane Fonda and the importance of keeping our sons emotionally literate, i.e. making sure they keep connected and capable of intimacy, love, compassion, and empathy. How do you suggest we proceed? How can schools and parents work together to create an emotional intelligence revolution? Okay. Well, I think I began answering, but I'll just say this even more. Since we're in the days of Sfiras Eimer and the days of Birur Hamidis, character refinement, personality development, so there's the word of emotional intelligence. It is true. There are many intellectually intelligent people, but emotional intelligence is of another sort. For some reason, it seems that women and girls have more of it than men, and maybe that's why they're bas mitzvah at 12, etc. Maybe it's due to social, cultural. We're not going to analyze it right now. But regardless, emotional intelligence means the intelligence of relationships, the intelligence between people. In Torah is intellectual intelligence. Ezu aveda shebelev zuhi tefillah. Prayer is emoting, learning to express what you need, not hiding it, not being duplicitous and deceptive, not trying to be manipulative. Being transparent and open, which of course goes hand in hand with feeling secure. If someone doesn't feel secure, they feel judged, or they feel in any other way that they are were criticized, very often their emotional development is stunted. Unfortunately, many people suffer from this. And if you're smart, you hide your tracks by hiding behind a good mind. Emotional intelligence is something that needs to be focused on from the youngest of ages. And it comes down to teaching people how to communicate with each other. Not just ignoring when you see two boys start fighting. I mean, there's normal fighting, obviously, at children play. But there's lessons to be learned all the time. Teaching emotional intelligence does not happen automatically. Even though there's a maturity that happens naturally in the development of a human being, but as Chassidus explains, Ibur, Yunikem, Meichen, the 3 stages of development. You have Maimonim and Tafshin Gimel about it in Ayin Beis, in Volume 1, and other places, I should reverse the order because Ayin Beis was before Tafshin Gimel, and other places, that the stages of, you could be in chronologically a place of maturity, but emotionally you can still be a 7-year-old, a 10-year-old. You may control it in how you express yourself. You're not going to just have a tantrum in the street, hopefully. But internally you're having a tantrum. Things get to you. You're petty, jealous, and so on. So it's critical to teach emotional intelligence. I intend to dedicate more time to this in coming episodes, but I just wanted to begin the discussion. Emotional intelligence is a very particular type of curriculum. I say curriculum in the broad sense of the word, meaning a particular approach that has methodologies and ways of focusing on a person's emotional smartness, how they get other people, And it's really getting people outside of themselves. You know, you can be very smart, but not be very narcissistic. Emotional intelligence teaches you about others, that you're not the only person around. There's others, how to listen, how to empathize, how to care, how to recognize pain, how to hear a voice when others may not hear it, and many more elements. So we will discuss this more, but I just wanted to get the ball rolling here. Next question. There's still a big question. How do we reconcile the Chassidic truth and principle of Hesach Hadas, meaning avoiding details and Parkenzech in the details, and going to the Chatchila Riber, which is based in Iyar coming up in 2 days, the Chatchila Riber, and just going into the light. How do you reconcile that with the idea of dealing with details, Birur Hamidus, looking at and examining during Krishma Shalamita, during the day in Sfiras HaEmer, each particular midah that we have, where seemingly if you get involved in those details, you never can free yourself and transcend them. So how do you reconcile these two, Aveda Primis and Birur Hamidus, together with the idea of having a bigger vision? Well, it's an excellent question. And my response is severalfold. First of all, Chassidus talks about this. That number one, Atzmus, is higher than Klal and higher than Pratim. Mashvakotin v'gadol. So when you really have a bittul to the highest level, you can also be completely immersed in a detail, like a pnimi. Vu'elikt lichten in ganzen. It's not a contradiction to the big vision. Because the big vision is reflected in the small vision. So yes, there's the way of Parkenzech, which means somebody dwells on Shiflas Adam, the Derech HaMusa, where you focus on the negative in a person. And instead of developing and focusing on Nirim Musakel, looking Sumar Menechem, looking upward, and bigger picture, you completely Parkenzech, you're involved in the dirt, and you become dirtied by it. You may in some way, this is the approach of negativity, breaking the body, breaking Nefesh HaBamis, which today, as the Alter Rebbe says, and the Rebbe brings very often, is not the Derech HaVeda, the Baal Shem Tov, Kisira Chamer Senacha, that not to avoid it, but to elevate it, to help it, to refine it. But that doesn't mean that working with details is a contradiction. Working with details you can work in, that's what's God's vision. Right now, He wants you to work on Chesed Sheba Chesed, Gevura Sheba Chesed. So Atzmus now is involved in that detail. The classic Sikha that the Rebbe speaks, Tovshim Emvav, the Kinus HaShluchim, where he says that Derech is that Dafkin HaPrat Sheba Prat, Dorten liegt Atzmus Hussein Sof. Which is essentially what means mitzvahs misyachsus ala atzmus, that a mitzvah, which is details, shiurim, we're coming from Pesach, how you eat a matzah, how much you eat. You could say, God in the Himmel. You're talking about atzmus. Atzmus is higher than gvul, higher than bli gvul, higher than both of them. So the geya, this prat, whether you do it this way, that way. But that's exactly the point. Like he speaks in Ayim Beis, that the idea is a hagbola of mitzvahs is hagbola atzmis. When you want to be mugbal, then it's a different thing. It's the koyach hagvul. They say when the Alter Rebbe would eat, it was the koyach hagvul of Ein Sof. It's a koyach hagvul, the same Ein Sof. One's gvul. It's very different than being involved in the details because the detail is important. It's not because of the details, because that's what Elokus wants. He wants you to be a balagola now. That's what you have to do. So it's the same higher vision that is now manifesting. Like Chassidus brings the muscle with the images. That what you can see in the big mirror, you can see the same thing in the small mirror. So the same idea you can see in every little detail. In a drop of water, in one water, you can see a reflection of the sun, just like in a big ocean. So the whole etzem is there in every detail. That's the haskol of it. In Aveda, I did quote in episode 46, and I refer you there to a maimer from Rabbi Hillel, where he quotes the Mittler Rebbe about davening. It was called Maimer Dibra Maskal Inyan HaTfilah V'Yizbornus. I quoted there at length, so I'll just refer you there, where he talks about the klal and prat in davening. Is the focus on the Eibishter, or is the focus on the kavanas protis of every dargan say the ishtalshlus? And that too, similar to Sherish Mitzvahs HaTfilah, Mispavla Daza Atinuk. There's a God. Why do I need to know the sakin, to be misakin this name and this level and this sphere and that sphere? But the end of the answer is that they both go hand in hand. It's not just a klal, a big vision. The vision has to be expressed in details. Okay. Let's move on. Now we still have to cover some of the essays. Let me see where we are. What other topics we still have to cover here? I say I may not be able to cover everything. So let me go to the next one, which is an unhealthy lifestyle of parents. My father is destroying himself. He does almost nothing with his life, eats too much, is extremely overweight, and does not sleep well. Basically, it is not only not pleasant to be around him, it is very disturbing. I come to visit him and he falls asleep as I talk. It is very difficult to see him this way. We as children have tried many different ways to get him to take care of himself. Diet, exercise. But to no avail. What can we do? Is there any hope? Question 2 in this regard. Similar vein. Hi, Rabbi Jacobson. I'm in a rut and can't get out. I'm overweight, but I'm unable to stop overeating. I have high blood pressure and cholesterol, and know I'm killing myself. You would think that would motivate me, but I still struggle to change my lifestyle and habits. Any advice? Okay. Well, first let's talk with parents and children. Kibbud Avim is honoring your parents in a very profound way. Rabbi Akiva, even when his mother was not well, mentally not well, she would walk outside, he would get down on his arms and legs, on his knees, and arms and knees, I should say, and arms and legs, whatever, and would put his hands under her feet so she shouldn't get cut. He could have said, hey, I'll put her in a nursing home, she's not well, I'm a big rabbi, great scholar. So first of all, our heart has to go out to our parents who gave their sacrificed their lives for us. And times when we were needy and we were completely helpless and vulnerable. That's number one. If indeed you see a parent like this, it may not be wise for children to get directly involved because you can get into starting to criticize, starting to argue. It's often best to find other people who are not direct children, meaning other relatives or friends. And at the end of the day, you really can't do something if someone doesn't want to be helped. You can cry, you can scream, you can pray, but if someone does not want to be helped, an adult, you can't help someone that does not want to be helped. As sad as it may be, sometimes we simply have to accept that. Now, that doesn't mean you shouldn't try. That doesn't mean you should put your heads together, talk to doctors, talk to others, talk to professionals, how to approach it. But like the second writer writes, if a person is simply destructive, even though they know how destructive they may be, or they're in denial, what can you do? So my heart goes out to you and to anyone that has a parent that are in that situation. You want to make sure you don't become like that yourself, because very often children become like their parents. I don't know all the circumstances. I can't give more advice than what I've said right now. Maybe something that if we knew more facts, we could be able to advise better. But I definitely suggest, as always, to talk to somebody objective and just get another perspective, especially if you're already so fed up and your family's fed up, to really hear, is there something else we can do? Often as people get older, they get lazier or they just get resigned and they just let go. And maybe that person needs a chiyuvdik, maybe you should go and offer to learn with your father. Maybe sing some nigunim, maybe take him somewhere on a trip. Maybe the focus shouldn't be on the negative and try to lift them up with positive things. When a person feels good about themselves, they're usually easier to motivate them. Maybe you should attempt that. So instead of focusing on all the negative and assuming it's all correct, and I have no reason not to, but to focus on a positive and do things that maybe can lift up your father's spirit. Regarding the person who's self-destructive, look, the good news is that you're aware. There's some people who wouldn't write this note, who completely are in denial. If you're aware, that means there's a glimmer of hope. You have to take that awareness and really get someone involved in your life that can help bring them in and make yourself accountable to them. I know it's easier said than done. We all have these challenges, but there's really nothing else you can really do. Make yourself accountable to someone. Force yourself. You must listen, whether it's to a life coach, whether it's exercise, whether it's a doctor. And that is one of the ways we get ourselves out of a rut. Ein chavish matras atzmei. A person in fetters is tied up, cannot untie themselves, and we must have someone else. Uninspired by community, how to grow. I am a BT of 3 years and now living in a nice frum community. However, lately I find the chevra and shul to be very tedious and uninspiring. What should I do? How can I keep growing? Question 2, Rabbi Jacobson, please help. I am from now many years. I was sold on completely changing my life to become a Torah-observant Jew based on the premise that Chassidim are living meaningfully, working on themselves to grow and be more self-realized and a better version of themselves, and that a conscious living means tapping into everyday godliness. Now I find myself living in a frum community surrounded by lackluster people who talk shtus. Shtus means nonsense, aren't inspired, seem exhausted, and are just getting by. Is it all very dull and it's all very dull and lackluster? Was this life misrepresented by shluchim whose job is to inspire others? Are they equally disenchanted in private? How can I surround myself with real Chassidim? End vent. Any advice would be appreciated. I'm feeling very uninspired by the frum Jews around me. And then over Pesach, I received also a few questions on Cape Cod. People who began their journey in a particular synagogue and community, and then feel they've outgrown. They don't feel the same spiritual inspiration. So I want to just say, above all, and this needs more focus than I have the time allows right now, but above all, the Jewish way to all these situations. I am not justifying, and I'm not here to criticize anybody, but the Jewish way is you have to take responsibility for your life. Yes, your journey may have begun with someone being kind to you and brought you in, and then you realize it's not as perfect as you would have liked, or far from it. But now you're an adult, and now you've been exposed to Yiddishkeit. Why is others responsible for your life? And I'm not taking others off the hook. Everybody should be looking at themselves. But you have to say to yourself, build your own community. Find friends. There's no perfect synagogue. And when I say build your own community, I don't mean it necessarily everybody has the ability to just go and build a community. I mean to say build friends. Find, like la carte, different rabbis, different teachers, different individuals. You may not find exactly what you need, but you have to take control of your life, because anything Judaism teaches is that we are leaders. We're proactive. We make things happen. Things don't happen to us. And it's sad when people fall into that type of attitude that, look, I got disappointed and so on. And where in the world would you not get disappointed? Again, I want to make sure I'm not defending any type of mediocrity that exists and so on. There's plenty of it. But we have to empower each other. And I hope this show, MyLife Chassidus Applied, does that. That's its objective. And it's something I learned directly from the Rebbe. Every situation, what are you going to do about it? That's how you have to ask yourself the question. And you have something you can do. Not say yourself, I'm a Baal Tshuva, I don't know anything, who am I? We're all God's children. We're all Chelik Elokam Mamish. We all have the Ashgacha Pratis, the gifts that God blessed us. And you could find, everyone can create opportunities. Everyone can create a revolution on a smaller scale, on a larger scale. Today I see very fascinating blogs, social groups, and so on that talk about these things, talking about it, inviting others, finding those kindred spirits. And this, regarding the situation of people in such a way, you don't have to feel bad if your synagogue you've outgrown. Find yourself another synagogue, find yourself another rabbi, or shop around. Like in anything, something doesn't serve you, find elsewhere. Now, some people feel guilty. That person helped me so much. How could I betray them? And they may even suggest as much that you're betraying them. You know something? You don't have to do it in an unpleasant way. You can be very kind and say, Rabbi, if you're asked, I really respect you. You've helped me tremendously. I still turn to you for many things. I have many needs, like all of us have, and I need to satisfy myself like any type of nourishment. Like telling a restaurant and say, hey, you don't only have to go to one restaurant or one place to eat. I understand it's not exactly the same thing, but done in a respectful way and done in a humble way, most people will be able to deal with it. If a rabbi and others can deal with it, then maybe they don't deserve you as much as they think they do. So bottom line is, you have to take control of your life. Again, this is something that deserves much more discussion, but I do want to get to the essays that we'll be doing in this new segment that we've added in MyLife, and that is reviewing the top essays and going down the list from the top downward of excellent essays that many people have submitted, and I hope that this will only be an incentive for much more to happen in that regard. Again, I say again that this topic, as well as other topics, I tend to address more, and please send any questions you may have. And there are some topics that I have not ended up discussing now, but let me go over to the essays right now. So let's begin with the essays. I'm going to do summarizing four excellent essays, which we will be posting on meaningfullife.com/mylife /contest, I believe. But on our homepage, meaningfullife.com, you'll find a link to the contest essays. And we're posting them, and we're also sending out each week a new one. If you subscribe there to our weekly newsletter, you'll get each week the new essay in your inbox. And as well as on the website, you can go and see the latest ones that are being posted. So let's start with the power of positive thinking. This was written by Rabbi Yitzchak Winner, 53 years old, a rabbi in Brooklyn. And basically did a very excellent analysis on Tachgut v'Zayngut, the goal to apply positive thinking according to Chassidus in our lives. What he did, interestingly, was, first of all, cited what we have today in New Age psychology, the concept of positive thinking. And then made an interesting comparison between Chassidic philosophy and New Age psychology. So I'll just review briefly the distinction. How does the teaching, we know that he writes, the power of the mind is tremendous. How does the teaching of Chassidic philosophy and the power of the mind differ from New Age philosophy teachings on the power of the mind? So he said, in Chassidic philosophy, the power is from God and his infinite abilities. The goal is achieving a greater divine plan. In New Age psychology, the power is from the person's mind and the universe. And 2, the goal is your happiness. This is not only academic, but like night and day. Chassidic philosophy demands 1, self-nullification, giving your will and life over to a greater being than yourself. And 2, acceptance. It might not work out the way you understand, and how God makes it happen is not our concern. In New Age psychology, by contrast, 1, self-believing in your own goodness and self-worth is the foundation, and acceptance only to the point which does not demand self-sacrifice. And then he goes into discussing the whole idea of trusting in God and Tachgut v'Zayngut from the Tzemach Tzedek's Vort, and explaining it in Amunah and Betochen. So it's really fascinating, the parallels, and it was an excellent essay. As I said, the essays were all so close. The fact that one had to win first prize, second prize was simply a matter of reality in this world. But this essay, as the others, are really good pieces of writing, well written, and very good. I encourage you all to read it. He sums up that thinking good means, regardless of personal worth, we have the ability to reach the highest levels of the perfectly righteous, for the souls of all Jews are essentially equal. 2, trusting God means that God has his own way to make the good he wants for this person to happen. And 3, C, using trust in God all the time as a way of life, not only in a time of crisis, trusting in God even when all is fine. And so you could read the essay, which was essay by Rabbi Yitzchak Winner. Essay 214, as I said, will be posted. The next one, The Power of Parable, by Rabbi Mendel Rubin, age 42, a rabbi and teacher in Albany, New York. Here what he did was, he took the idea of a moshel in Chassidus, the power of parable, and explains how significant and fundamental it is to make things relevant, quoting very respectfully his father, Rabbi Yisrael Rubin from Albany, the idea of a moshel. He brings from the Maimer Veidaita Moskva Tafresh Nun Zayin from the Rebbe Rashab, how he used the power of parable to explain divine unity. And then he goes on to different mishalim, the Aleph. The Frierdiker Rebbe brings the Aleph is like a Wasserträger, a water carrier. An Aleph is like the water carrier carrying the pails of water. And then, interestingly, goes ahead and takes a mashal of smartphones and gives a whole series of lessons that we can learn from smartphones and Avodas Hashem. So this too was a very excellent essay in the sense of applying Chassidus to a real reality in smart apps. Where it was probably weaker was in the sources of really taking an idea in Chassidus and applying it. Though he did take the idea of a mashal, but it could have been developed more. But it's an excellent essay to read and quite humorous as well as very relevant. The lists he has, I believe, 5 or 6 messages that you can learn from a smartphone. I'll just give you one. The first message is how smartphones can access signal virtually anywhere. Phones once had cords, today it's wireless. And explains that that's one of the lessons, that everything, you can find alakus in everything. That was one example. Then he brings other messages, and again, I'll refer you to read it online, The Power of Parable by Rabbi Mendel Rubin, essay number 217. The next essay I want to review quickly is a Hebrew essay written by Yaakov Deutsch, age 34, a presenter from Yerushalayim. It was written in Hebrew, so it's still in Hebrew. And here, basically, the writer makes a case of explaining the difference, why behavioral psychology did not catch. That Freud, who taught psychotherapy, getting into the kishkas of something, as opposed to Watson and Skinner, who came and rejected it completely by saying that we need to have a behavioral form of psychology, and yet behavioral psychology did not really catch and eliminate entirely the other type. And he says because they were lacking one major thing, what Chassidus teaches. He brings a very fascinating story about the Maimer Yavi Levush Malchus in Teira Eir, which Alter Rebbe learned from actually one of the Talmidim of the Magid, that he wanted to be by the Magid's table, but the Alter Rebbe, Beis Rebbe, he says he sent him to the Magid's teacher. The Magid, who was it? He sent him to, Rabbi Yechiel, the son-in-law of the Baal Shem Tov, rather. And there he learned Yavil Levush Malchus. And what does he learn there? That Maisa HaMitzvahs is higher than Limud HaTorah because it reaches Seviv Kalam. So the case he makes in the thesis in this essay is that adds something that Watson and Skinner did not have. It's not just behavioral psychology as in the details. And they would be very impressed with the details of Shulchan Aruch and behavior modification. But more than that Maisa HaMitzvahs, behavioral, actually touches the Etzem, touches Seviv Kalam. And that is the power, really, of the behavioral power. And that, if that's developed properly, can be a revolution in psychology. Again, I encourage you to read it. That is essay number H37, as in Hebrew 37, by Yaakov Deutsch. And finally, The Power of Mystery by Yaakov Danishevsky, age 26, a student from YU living in Jerusalem. And he begins by quoting the Zohar, "The world endures only by virtue of the secret." And basically, he talks about how appreciating the mystique and the awe of something can affect both relationships, education, and religious engagement. It's an excellent essay, really excellent essay, and it goes into a very, very academic but also very practical application of how the greatest challenge we face today is that people do not see that type of sense of the sense of mystery. Where he talks, I just want to quote what he says here. The mystery and awe that, for example, children have. Sense of wonderment and interest in the world, cultivating an awareness and interest in deeper layers of ourselves. Others and the world can play a vital role in countering complacency in relationships, education, and religious life. So using Chassidus that teaches us that what you see is not what you get, that there's a deeper dimension that turns us, instead of being mechanical and conformist, can teach us how to reveal the hidden in everything we do. He quotes at length Perek Lamed Beis in Tanya, which teaches about that the key to love is recognizing that we are souls, not just bodies. Again, one is able to peer above the plank, sees that in reality it is one light. Physical bodies are the plank of wood causing human beings to appear as distinct entities. He gives a beautiful analogy of light shining through a plank where you only see the glimmers of light through the holes. Yet in essence they are in fact united as one divine being. So again, it's by understanding the deeper applications, both in relationships, as I said, which is nourished by an interest to know one another more and more, instead of just taking for granted and going in an automatic pilot. Same thing with education. Instilling genuine curiosity and interest within the student transforms the learning experience. And finally, in religious engagement, awakening a sense of wonderment and questioning primes a person for a meaningful relationship with religion. Again, excellent essay to read, number 283. And with that, we sum up the essays for this week, and we will continue going through the essays. I want to finally conclude that this has been MyLife Chassidus Applied, episode 64, which we do every week at 8 to 9 p.m. Sunday. We welcome your questions, anonymous questions, at our forum, meaningfullife.com/mylife. And if you want to send us an email, a personal email, where you want a response directly to yourself, please send it to my email address, Simon, S-I-M-O-N, @meaningfullife.com. It's an honor, as always, to share a few words with you, trying to take the treasures, the secrets, the powers of Chassidus, and to help us think positively, both on a behavioral and cognitive level, to use mishal and parable and understand the mystery and awe of existence, all to apply ourselves to our lives in ways that we can prepare ourselves, our children, our communities, our families to Mashiach. Because at the end of the day, Mashiach is a product of our work, when you reveal in your life a divine element, when you take Chassidus and you apply it to your personal life, you are revealing a taste and a little piece of Mashiach. Like he says in Moed Enayim, every one of us has a spark of Mashiach, and those accumulate. In addition to the millions and billions of mitzvahs and activities and Mesiras Nefesh done by those that preceded us, then we have the final eruption, which is right there. We were told we're right at the threshold. It's overripe to finally do that final step that will bring that gilui of the Aleph from Geula into Gula, and we should be zeichet to the Gula Amitis Vashlema, especially as we enter Chedesh Iyar. Everyone should have a good Chedesh, good Beis Iyar, Chatchila Riber. And until next Sunday, this has been My Life, Chassidus Applied, episode 64.